Just okay. It's noon. Should we open the room?
Yes, and Seth is going to be our first speaker.
Yep.
Yes.
Great. See you on the other side.
Welcome to everyone who has just joined us. It is noon here in Chicago, and we are excited to talk with you about this program. We're going to wait one more minute before we fully get started as people continue to join. If you are so daring, we're always curious about the geography of the people joining us. So if you can use the chat, chime in with where you are joining us from, and I'll put mine in here. So we've got Jennifer and me from Chicago so far. I know Linda is out on Cape Cod right now, so she is already in the beautiful environment that we'll be talking about. Okay, we've got Catherine in Aurora. There we go. We've got Tom pretty close there in Falmouth, Maine, and Nancy in Fort Collins, Colorado. And we've got Brooklyn. All right, we are getting the country represented, and it looks like all of Chicago well represented as well. Well, I see it has struck 12:01, which is our cue to actually get started for our information session on Scientific Discovery Program Cape Cod. My name is Seth Green, and on an afternoon like this one, I'm especially proud to say that I'm the dean here at the University of Chicago Graham School. I'll be offering a brief welcome, and then I'll be turning it over to Linda Hyman, who is the Burroughs Wellcome Director of Education at the Marine Biological Laboratory, and also our main partner in this lifelong learning travel study experience. And then we'll be turning it over to Conway, our Manager of Innovation Programs, who is not only in charge of a lot of the ideas that you'll hear about from Linda, but also will provide the logistics and details for those who are interested. And then most important, because I know many of you have had a chance to look at some of the details on the website, we will come to your questions and will hopefully provide answers. So if we go to the next slide, and then one more, I'll just start, for those of you who are not familiar, with a brief welcome to the Graham School. So Graham is a very proud founding unit of the University of Chicago. And indeed, when John D. Rockefeller and William Rainey Harper, the founding president of the university, pictured at the front of your screens, were imagining the University of Chicago, Harper tells Rockefeller in a letter, "I have a plan which is at the same time unique and comprehensive, which I am persuaded will revolutionize university study in this country." Something that I think we can say 130 years later is true. And a core element of that plan, there were 3 units in the original university, was the Graham School, and then it was called the Extension. And the idea was, how do we take these extraordinary assets intellectually of a university, and how do we bring them not only to our young people, but to people across all ages and stages of their life, so that we can see learning across every, what Harper often called, chapter of life. And if you go to the next slide, that remains our mission to this day, that we are trailblazing new paths in lifelong learning. And one of the ways we do that is constantly looking at the big ideas in the world and asking, how do we organize transformative education in ways that are experiential and deep for people that may be wanting to better understand the world primarily in terms of life enrichment, rather than just to have a career advancement or to join a certain field. And if we go to the next slide, that remains core 132 years later to everything at the Graham School today, where we are bringing programming that rigorously explore big ideas that challenge and change the world through programs and classes in the arts, sciences, and society. And for those of you who know Graham, we've had long-standing leadership in the kind of traditional liberal arts and society, And one of the places of growth, which this program represents, and we were so thrilled with the positive outcomes of the first year of this last September, is that we've been able to really begin building a really strong opportunity set in the sciences for people that really want to understand the major discoveries and innovations that are taking place right now and that are transforming our world. If we go to the next slide, I'll just mention that this is part of a portfolio of opportunities at the Graham School. So in addition to travel study, which you see on the right side of your screens, we also have many classes that are open enrollment that allow you to go across all of the divisions of the university. We have a basic program. We often call it the Great Books program, where you learn the kind of foundations or basics of liberal education. And then we have a Master of Liberal Arts, which is among the most respected and rigorous in the world, where you look across the university's eminent ideas and you have a chance to then capstone with a distinctive thesis, often in areas like ethics and leadership or literary studies. And the final slide for me is next. And I'll just mention here that scientific discovery is in a moment of, true significance in the sense that the, pandemic and other events in our world, I think, are showcasing just how much innovation is taking place and how it is leading to a longevity revolution. It's leading to, the chat GPTs and entirely transforming our workplaces. And we know that as scientific discovery continues, it's actually going to pick up in pace because many of these are innovations that build upon the current innovations. And I'll just share that as someone who's a dean here, I have the joy of kind of sitting in a leadership role where I get to see across the many parts of this incredible intellectual environment. And as many of you may not know, the Marine Biological Laboratory is actually affiliated with the University of Chicago. And so we get to see into the jewels of MBL, as it's called in short. And it is one of the most fascinating and genuinely creative places, even in a university like ours that is constantly defining new fields. And as someone who has myself come from a non-scientific background, I have been, truly in awe of the discoveries. And it's also really helped me to better engage in a lot of the public conversations about science and society, being able to just dip my head in occasionally to the incredible innovations taking place there. And so with that, I will turn it over to one of the people that is leading the educational side of the work happening at the Marine Biological Laboratory. And that is my colleague, Linda Hyman. And Linda, I'll turn it over to you with great gratitude and just with an acknowledgement that Linda is extraordinarily accomplished. She comes to the MBL and she's been there for a long time now, but prior to that was the Associate Provost of Boston University and has held many other extraordinary leadership roles and is also someone who comes from a scientific background herself. So Linda, let me turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Seth, and thank you for that gracious introduction. And I too am delighted to be here today. It's so before I get into the MBL, today is a special day for us here as well in the Boston area. It's known as Patriots Day, and we just got finished running the Boston Marathon. And so everybody's kind of excited about spring being here, and this is really the start of spring for us. And so we're delighted to show you a little bit about what we have planned for the programming this year. And I'm going to start by the next slide, please, Conway. So here I am in Woods Hole, Massachusetts, and you can see we're a bit far away and we share different kinds of water here, the ocean. And Woods Hole is pointing to this little flip of land that reaches out into the Atlantic Ocean. And so we take advantage of why we're here. And in the next slide, let me tell you a little bit, not just about Cape Cod, but the very special places that we are, Woods Hole, which is really truly a village of scientists. So in this aerial view, right smack in the center, you can see where we're located, this cluster of buildings, the MBL. And we've been here for well over 100 years. We were established in around 1888. And we were the first amongst our colleagues, but we are delighted to be surrounded by science of all types. So right down the street is the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute. And then really literally across the road is the NOAA facility and another government facility, the USGS. And then finally, just about a mile down the road, the Woodwall Climate Research Center. So together, this is the kind of place where when you're at the coffee shop or pie in the sky, for those of you who know our little village, you look to your right and look to your left, you're going to find a scientist to talk to. And that's what makes our village so very special. In the next slide, I thought I'd just take a moment to explain why. Why is Woods Hole so special? Why did people settle here? And I am not a geoscientist or an oceanographer, but I know enough to understand that this is a spot on the Earth where the two currents converge. That is the current from the North Atlantic current and the Gulf Stream. And boom, right here in this little spot, there is this perfect collection of conditions which allow for a huge and amazing diversity of life in our oceans. And on the right hand of this slide, you see the rewards of a collecting ship. We went out and we just dredged and find all the wonderful living beings in our ocean. Doesn't look that attractive in this picture, but if you go to the next slide, this is what we find. I mean, these are amazing creatures that live in the ocean from which we can learn so much. So the biological diversity right off of our shores allows us to take a deeper dive, for lack of a good analogy, I think, into the ocean and who lives there and what they can teach us about fundamentals of biology. And if you go to the next slide, I'll just point out some of the amazing fruits of that labor. So we really learned about nerve impulses from the squid. It's an amazing model organism that has led to the birth of neurobiology. The horseshoe crab, some of you might know, has allowed us to create in biotechnology the detection of bacterial contamination in all sorts of products that we would ingest. So that's an amazing, if you come to our program, I'll introduce you to the horseshoe crab, and it's blue blood. It really truly has blue blood. One of my personal favorite advances was looking at sea urchins and starfish. And from there, we learned how cells control their own cell division, ultimately really opening up the world of cell cycle division understanding, which essentially opened up a tremendous window into cancer biology. And then finally, in one of our courses, actually, I'll tell you about, there was a land-breaking discovery on how molecules are precisely controlled within cells. All of that ultimately led to, over the course of our history, over 60 Nobel Prizes affiliated with the kind of research we do here at the MBL. So in the next slide, one of the hallmarks of our sort of founding philosophy is the marriage of teaching and research. These two things go together. We're tied at the hip. And here you see a course which is called Embryology, which started in 1893. So this summer, we will be celebrating the 130th anniversary of this course. And these attract scientists from all over the world. Over the course of the summer, we'll have over 1,500 scientists here participating in a variety of these types of courses. But looking at this just from a historical point of view, notice the number of women in the course. To us, that's a real point of pride. Back in 1893, we welcomed all sorts of scientists to come here that really didn't have opportunities in other places. Sort of fast forwarding, this is what the course looks like today. Next slide. It takes place in our dedicated teaching laboratory, the Lurb Science Building, and it looks a little different than the one in 1883. But we're here with the class. It's also extremely diverse, utilizing machinery and particularly microscopes and other sorts of biological equipment that really can only be found here at the MBL. So it's an exciting opportunity to bring people together and really convene here at the MBL. So in addition to bringing these folks here, there's resident research, and it really focuses in, I'm going to say, 4 areas. The first is biological discovery and new research organisms. What you're looking at here is a cephalopod, an octopus, and it's one of our favored new biological research organisms. The next slide, or the next, is the work that goes on in our Ecosystem Center, environmental science, the ecology and climate change efforts. Next is the microbial study of microbes, their relationships to the symbiotes that they live with and in. So the microbiome, an area of, again, of rich impact in human health. And then finally, seeing the invisible, which is the imaging capacity that we've developed here. So all of our courses take into account all of these different areas of research. And I'll tell you a little bit about how they will play into our summer or our grad school programming in just a moment. Just a little bit more on each of these research areas. So our climate change studies really happen all over the globe, but given where we are, the salt marshes are a particular area of interest for our resident scientists. And certainly their own research really addresses the response to stressors such as nutrient pollution, plastics, and sea level rise. So we'll have an opportunity to visit the marsh. Next slide is this ability to really see the unseen world using our imaging technology to capture life in its fullest. This is an example of a coral, and it's absolutely beautiful in the way that we can stain and see individual cells. The next slide. Oh, well, we skipped one, but it was again about our imaging. That's it, the new research organisms and our ability to stain and see different parts of the organism and understand how they're impacted by things like gene editing and the ability to eliminate a gene and ask what happens to that organism. And so here's an example of staining and the beautiful kind of product of that effort. And as noted in the next slide, we are very proud of our affiliation with the University of Chicago. And again, this is a very special year in that we are celebrating the 10th year of that affiliation. And Robert Zimmer, we're very proud of his investment in us. And the MBL has had an extraordinarily valuable role as a source of innovation and creative collaboration in modern biology. And so this is an example of how we look forward to continuing the collaboration with the University of Chicago. And with that, I think I'm going to throw it to Conway.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Linda. Hello, all. My name is J.M. Conway, and I serve as Manager of Innovation Programs with the Graham School at the University of Chicago. I'm going to spend a little bit of time sharing more about our travel study program, Scientific Discovery Cape Cod, a little bit of the logistics and details about the program. So this is our opportunity for you to come and explore some of biology's biggest questions alongside the faculty and researchers at the Marine Biological Laboratory located in the Story Shores of Cape Cod. This is a hands-on program, so we're going to welcome students from all backgrounds. You don't have to have a background in science to join us, and you'd be welcome to come and learn with us and experiment with new technologies, primarily in gene editing and ecology. I'll just note that the pictures you see on this slide are pictures from last year's cohort, some of the lab work and scenery on campus. We will be on site, living and learning at the Marine Biological Laboratory later this year, October 8th through the 15th. And our time will feature learning days and experimental days, lectures from faculty and researchers at each of the centers that Linda shared about just a while ago. So the Josephine Bay Paul Center for Comparative Molecular Biology and Evolution, the Eugene Bell Center for Regenerative Biology and Tissue Engineering, and the Ecosystems Center. I'll pass it back to Linda to give a brief overview of what our residential learning schedule will look like in October. Linda.
Thank you, Conway. Yeah, so this year what we've decided to do is present sort of the best of the MBL. And so the way we have organized the week is to highlight the research of each of the centers in a different way. I think what's really critical is to understand that you will be spending a lot of time in the lab. Our basic motto here is learn by doing, and we carry that through with all of our educational activities. So this is not sitting in a classroom, this is sitting in a lab and really getting your hands dirty, if you will, into the hands-on experiments. So on the first day, we'll offer, of course, a welcoming reception and a keynote address, which is likely to really focus on, again, why Woods Hole, what makes us special, and the history of the MBL. But starting first thing Monday morning, we'll be in the lab, and we will be working on microbiome. We'll be working on the isolation of microbes. It will involve some collection into the local environment and bringing samples back to the lab, isolating DNA, getting DNA sequences, doing some bioinformatics. So these are quite exciting, very cutting edge techniques that we're able to package into a relatively small, short time frame. That'll continue on Tuesday, and we'll complete our tour of the MBL, if you will, by very special activities, including a visit to the Marine Resources Center and the library. I know I don't have to tell, I think, this group that visiting a library may sound, I often have to explain to students, like, I know this doesn't sound great, but I can assure you, this is actually one of the highlights of the trip. The MBL Hui Library is the home of many, many amazingly rare books, which we bring out and have you really dive into. And so it's quite an exciting experience, not to mention the fact that we also have Thomas Hunt Morgan's Nobel Prize. And it is the most photographed experience at the MBL. I have several of them myself holding the Nobel Prize. It weighs a lot more than you think, and it's really just a truly exciting opportunity. That day will be followed by some more science. Wednesday is our sort of hump day, and we've decided to open it up to a full day excursion. There may be some time in the lab in the morning to check your samples and see how things are going, but really that day is to introduce you to Cape Cod itself. So we have several excursions planned, all of which have to do with celebrating Cape Cod. So there's opportunities to visit the Whale Museum, to go to Martha's Vineyard and participate in the African American Heritage Tour, or visit the Cape Cod National Seashore. So those are just some ideas of some things that we have in mind. But on Thursday, we'll have you back in the lab, learning about CRISPR, gene editing, working with zebrafish, and doing some of those really cool imaging experiments that I showed on some earlier slides. We'll also make sure that you get to go out on the Gemma, which is our collecting boat, and actually see how we collect the organisms and learn about what's really living in our backyard, and have begin our discussions on climate change and our ecosystems, followed by a trip out to the marsh and a collection of samples to bring back to the lab again for further analysis. So I think the take-home lesson here is lots of time in the lab, lots of opportunities to go out and see firsthand the environment that we're in, and also time to really meet each other and meet the scientists here to take advantage of the true convening power of the MBL. Just a couple more slides to put a little bit of color onto some of these activities. Again, the Nobel Prize is here, as well as a large variety of these rare books that we'd love to show folks. Next slide. This is our collecting boat. We call it the Gemma, and it's heading into the Marine Resources Center, a specialized facility and building where we host and keep alive all of the organisms that we study here, including the cephalopods and the whole variety of different organisms. Next slide. are the day off activities. Depending on what the whales are up to, we may be able to do a whale tour, a whale trip. If they're not in town, we'll visit them at the New Bedford Whaling Museum, which is just truly a fascinating place. Or we live right at the spot where the boat to Martha's Vineyard takes you to the vineyard. And so an opportunity to participate in the African American Heritage Trail there is really fascinating. We're also right down the road from the National Seashore, which is down by Provincetown. And for those of you who enjoy just outdoor activities, we sit right at the end of an amazing bike path called the Shining Sea Bike Path, where you can ride for miles and miles right along the seashore. So these are just a little bit of a snapshot of the kinds of things we are planning for this program. The next slide, a little bit of reality. So this is our campus. We host a conference center. So all meals are taken in our cafeteria, which is quite nice and has a fantastic view of our pond, Eel Pond. So you'll be eating and sleeping here. For those of you who haven't been in a dorm room in a while, we wanted to remind you what dorm life is like. And as you can see, it's a little modest, but it's perfectly comfortable. So these are the rooms with twin beds and private bathrooms. Not super fancy, but you can't beat the view. And with that, I think I will pass it back to Conway.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Linda, for giving us a window into the day-to-day during our time for October. Just wanted to wrap up here, sharing a little bit about our application and pricing. We encourage you to apply online at grahamschool.uchicago.edu. The tuition and fees for this year's program are $4,295. That includes a virtual orientation prior to our arrival in Woods Hole, Massachusetts. This will be an opportunity for you to meet your cohort, to build some relationships, to get more information about the day in and day out of our time together in Woods Hole at the NBL. It includes your on-site learning and experimentation. It includes the cost of your associated activities that you'd be able to choose on those excursion days. And it also covers the cost of your on-campus room and board at Swope and many of your meals while you're with us in October. I just wanted to give you a feel for the application. It is not a long application at all. It's going to collect from you personal information, your University of Chicago affiliation, which just lets us know if you are affiliated with the University of Chicago as a current student or a staff member, if you have taken some Graham courses and or not. You can also let us know if you have a child or grandchild who's a part of the University of Chicago college system, but you also don't have to have an affiliation at all. So it's just helpful for us to know if you do have an existing relationship with the University of Chicago. And then we ask for 2 short answers. We ask you to share a little bit about yourself and your professional and educational background and interests, and share a little bit about with us about why you're interested in participating in the program. We ask a couple of questions about any accommodations or dietary needs that you might need. We ask for an emergency contact and a couple of questions at the end, just so you understand the travel logistics. So it's not a very extensive application, should be pretty easy to fill out. And as always, you can email with questions that you might have about the application. I will end us there and then make space for your questions. Feel free to type questions into the chat, or you can use the raise hand feature of the Zoom application and we can answer your questions. Okay, I see something in the chat here. Okay, so seeing no questions. Great.
Actually, I have one from Susan. What's the average age of participants?
So last year we had a wide range of ages in the program. I think our youngest student in the program was around 19 or 20. And then I think we had several participants who were in an older age cohort. I'd say from around 50 all the way up to 70.
And I can read questions to you, Conway.
Okay,
How many
perfect. Yeah,
students are in the class or in the cohort?
oh, wait a minute. I'm sorry. That's a preview of what's to come. Say that question again, Seth.
Yeah, how many students are in the class or cohort? I know we keep it intimate.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it's an intimate group. We're hoping to make space this year for about 16 to all the way up to 20 learners to be together with us in October.
And I can, go for it.
Thank you, guys. Yeah, I'll just add myself into the squares. I've been behind the scenes. Hello, my name is Nikki. I also work at the Graham School. And I've noticed that we have a student from the past cohort who's actually in our audience, Christian Rubio, and I thought it might be fun to hear his perspective. I know he's already agreed via chat. So Christian, I might throw you into the mix too, if you don't mind.
Yeah, welcome, Christian.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Yes, just to share to the other group that I have a wonderful experience last year. I am from Chile, so it's far from the MBL program. That was a unique experience. I'm working in a private sector and working for a business here, but the chance to work in a lab, I work back like 30 years back from a lab, and the people there is very open. They're really willing to help you, to explain several times sometimes. So really have a chance to do a hands-on project. I particularly for me was the highlight of the gene editing activity, the CRISPR technology. This is a wonderful, I don't think you have a chance really like for us normal people to do this kind of technology that probably they will change the world. So I would really recommend to attend the program. I will maybe make an adjustment. I would say that the average of the group is around 70 years old. In fact, we have few students from 80 years old. That was amazing. People willing to really keep going and learning and be in the lab with 80 years old. That was very amazing. So don't be afraid of going back to the lab. I think it's a wonderful opportunity, and the people are really willing to help you to answer questions and in a very simple way. So my really recommendation, I have a wonderful opportunity to attend the program. In fact, seeing that you make some adjustment of the program would be great maybe to go again. So thank you.
Thank you, Christian. And I also see that Nancy is here. Nancy is also one of the participants from last year. So Nancy, if you'd like to share at all your experience, we'd love to have you share.
Well, yes, I went last year. I loved the experience. It was great to be out there in Cape Cod. I hadn't been to Cape Cod in so many years, and right, everything is great. Like Christian was saying, the lab work, you get to go with these fantastic microscopes and do these experiments. And, you know, the group we had a smaller group, but it was a nice group, and it was just a great experience. And the trip on the Gemma, and we, everything was, I loved the experience, and I encourage anyone to sign up and come along.
Thanks so much, Nancy.
There are some other questions in the chat. I know one that I can help answer. Are there scholarships available to attend? The answer is that we do want to make sure that this is accessible. We don't have that formally on the application, but if you email either me, and I'll put my email in the chat, or Conway, we are able to consider that and to do our best to support you. So let us know if that is a barrier potentially, and we want to try to do our best to remove that. Who are the teachers? I think that's a question most of all, Linda, for you, but then maybe we can come back, Nancy and Christian, to get your thoughts as students in these teachers' classes. Go for it, Linda.
Yeah, so our resident faculty, the researchers themselves, the ones that are here doing this work every single day, take time out of their day to participate in the course. And so they're your teachers. Sometimes we'll bring in some graduate students or others to help out, but you really get to hear from the experts.
And I mean, Christian and Nancy, can I maybe put this to you? I know one thing that might seem intimidating, it does to me, even with my education, like this is real science and it's really deep. Did you both feel though that you could participate successfully in the learning, even though there's, I mean, quite a bit of real scientific rigor obviously taking place? Yeah, go for it, Nancy.
Yes, the instructors are very approachable and very there to help you. And there's instructors in the lab and then assistants with the lab. And so, yeah, everything is very down to earth and you can learn and ask any questions. They're very approachable.
And I want to add also, yes, and I want to add also that at the end, you do by yourself. So even though they're very willing to help you, but the great thing is that you do it. So this is a very amazing. And I want to highlight especially the Nipan Patel, this director of the program. He's a very approachable guy and he takes time to explain to you, even though maybe there are some naive question or simple question, but they really make you feel that they really want to teach you and to explain how it's work. So that was a very good experience.
Marie asked, and maybe Conway, you remember last year's group, the average academic background of the students. I know there probably is no average.
There's, you're right, there's no average. We did have a set of people who maybe had, I would say, maybe think about their past lives working in science. And one of the students who was in the cohort last year was actually studying recently marine biology and joined us, was an international student as well. Some folks who were kind of friends of MBL, but who had never had to the opportunity to have a hands-on experience at the MBL. So there was a wide a range of folks, but not all people who were familiar with science at all. I'd say there's maybe about a 50-50 split.
Are there follow-up learning opportunities through GRAM? And I'll share the answer is yes. So thank you, Marian, for that question. We have been expanding our investigations in the sciences. And we have a new partnership with the Institute on the Formation of Knowledge that has a number of scientific courses coming out of it on climate and on some of the technological sciences. Two, we're looking at something called the residential seminar in Hyde Park that might feature one of our neurobiologists next spring. So there are many, I think, opportunities to go deeper in this material. And this is hopefully just the starting place for many of you who want to journey further into the sciences from a lifelong learning standpoint. I see a question about online access to the library's resources after the class. Linda, do you know that possibility?
Yeah, I believe that it's open to the public for the most part. So depending on what level of access, but yeah, I think that that would be an interesting opportunity.
Other questions? We welcome you also to shout them out. You can unmute and share, and you can also raise your hands if you have any that you'd prefer to speak rather than write in. Oh, extra clothing and equipment. We missed that. I apologize. So I don't think people need to bring any of their own equipment, but any attire, not so much from a fashion sense, but from a compliance sense, Linda?
Well, I'm looking at Christian and Nancy, who might remember that very wet, mucky day in the swamp. So maybe a good pair of shoes that you don't mind getting dirty. Other than that, you know, we'll update folks on weather conditions, etc. It's quite mild here still at that time of year, but yeah, nothing. No, certainly no specialized equipment.
looking at those pictures earlier, I feel like you need to wear something colorful so you can compete with all of the genetic and other material and all of its color. And CEUs. So we will come back to you on CEUs. We do go through that application process for a number of courses. It's another team member of ours, Zoe Eisenman, who leads our non-credit team, who's not here at the moment. But I believe that there's a way that Zoe can actually just gather the information that we already have on the curriculum and submit. And so if Betsy, if you're open to this, we will, when we send a follow-up message, we'll learn more, and then we'll share whether or not we might be able to gain CEUs for this. I would believe so, honestly, because I've seen that process in other contexts, and what we're doing here, I think, would certainly be worthy from at least my understanding of that proposal process. And then the room setup in terms of singles or doubles.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm pretty sure we have this set up as singles. As we saw, there are 2 twin beds, but you would not have a roommate unless you request one. Is that right, Conway? Do you remember the details?
That's right. Yeah. So you can, if you're coming with a companion and you'd like to stay in the same room, we can arrange that. If you're coming alone, you'd stay in the room. There'd be two beds in the room, but you wouldn't be paired with someone else from the program. You'd have the room to yourself.
And then application deadline, I know it's rolling, but we do anticipate filling up given our capacity. But yeah, go for it, Conway.
That's right. So we do encourage early application. We are accepting applications on a rolling basis, and it is our best practice to close out the applications about a month prior to the start of the program. Again, this program is going to run at a start of October 8th. So we would count back a month from there to try to get everything closed out so we can make sure that everyone who's participating has what they need, and we can have that virtual orientation session. So rolling basis, but please do apply early. I won't say often, but definitely early.
Any other questions? I mean, can I ask this question maybe, Christian and Nancy, before we depart? Do you want to just describe like your favorite takeaway or learning? Like what's one thing that you walked away from that maybe has stuck with you as you've seen the world and kind of followed news since your visit? Oh, Nancy, you're on mute, but you have us in suspense.
I would just say learning about that CRISPR technology and learning about how it works and how diseases can be eliminated by these little changes in the genes and genomes. And I mean, it's fascinating.
Christian, anything to add?
Yeah, along the same thing, the CRISPR technology. What amazed me is like, it's so easy to do it. In some way, it's also frightening, right? Because it's like everyone can do this change of genes. And so that was the highlight for me, definitely.
Thank you, Christian. And I just saw another question about who to reach out to if you have further questions, or if you think through whether or not this is a good program fit for you. Please feel free to reach out to me directly. My email is jmconway@uchicago.edu. Happy to have any and all of your questions about the program, even if you'd like to have a one-on-one follow-up about whether or not this is a good fit for you. Happy to make some time to meet with you and share. Wonderful. And a couple of times already, the application link has gone into the chat. So again, we'd love to have your applications and your questions. As we close out here, I did, in preparation for creating today's presentation, find a sweet little video that gives a glimpse into Woods Hole and the Cape Cod area. So I'll just play that for us while folks exit the room, and end again by saying thank you so very much for joining us today to hear about the program.
Conway, I don't think we have any sound.
Let me try that again. Maybe the sound is not gonna work. It's not giving me an option to give you sound. Okay, let's try now. Start from the beginning. Well, if you are still here with us, thanks again for joining us to hear more about the Scientific Discovery Cape Cod program, and we look forward to your questions and your applications. Have a great morning, afternoon, or night.